Hello, everybody. I'm Geoff Keighley from the Game Awards. How you doing? Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a first look there. We are going to have a panel with a lot of the game developers, Camilla Luddington, and the team here in a minute to tell you more about what we just saw. But how cool is it that we have video games here in New York City at Tribeca Film Festival? You guys excited about that? Cool. Me too. It's awesome to have something here in New York. This game is actually being developed up in Montreal, not too far from here, from the team. And Daniel, the director, who you met, will be out here to talk a bit about the gameplay of Tomb Raider, which is cool that no one in the world besides the press has seen that footage. So you probably saw this morning there was that trailer that came out. The media got to play it in LA, London, and Montreal yesterday. But you're the first audience, public in the world that got to see the gameplay of Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So I hope you enjoyed that. I want to say hi to everyone watching on the Twitch stream who didn't get to see that gameplay. Sorry, guys, you'll get to see that at E3, I think. But we do have a great panel discussion that's going to come up right now with some of the developers and Camilla Luddington, the performance artist behind Tomb Raider. We'll have Jill, the writer from Square, Daniel, the director, and Rich Briggs from Crystal Dynamics as well, to talk about putting this game together. By show of hands, how many of you guys have played the previous two Tomb Raider games? All right, so you're a devoted audience, so you know the story. We don't need to spend a lot of time recapping that. Anyone go back to playing like the original Tomb Raider, like late 90s? Okay, wow. All right, so this is a core Tomb Raider audience. Well, yeah, it's so cool what they've done with this game, reinventing it. How many of you guys saw the Tomb Raider movie recently? All right, see, more gamers than Tomb Raider moviegoers. That's good news, because these games have been great, and I think we are now ready to bring to the stage our panelists. So please join me in welcoming the team behind Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Come on out. Got Camilla Luddington, Lara, Rich Briggs, Daniel Bisson, Jill. Come on in.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Okay,
it's been a busy couple days for these guys because they've been all around the world revealing the game, but I know they wanted to come here and share it with you guys for the first time. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Start with you, Camilla. That was quite an intense scene we saw at the end there.
Yeah.
Tell us about the evolution of Lara as a character, because we were talking backstage. I mean, you've been now embodying her for, almost 8 years from the original game when we met a young Lara who, was just coming into her own. Now she's, I mean, you see the trailers, right? She's a warrior almost. Tell us about how has the character evolved and how has your performance changed over the past 7, 8 years?
Well, it's funny because I feel like at this point Lara is part of me because she's the character I played for the longest of any character. But I think, you've seen the very first game that she has that excitement and naivety to her about the world and adventure. And obviously, at that point she has already lost her parents, but she's created this new family around her that feels like her cushion, her safety. And you see her lose, in some way, Sam and Roth. Sorry if anyone hasn't played the first game.
Spoilers. Most of them raised their hands if they played the previous.
Okay, sorry.
Make her in good shape.
And it just rips the carpet from under her. And I think then you see her go, again, feel like she's lost everything. In the second game, she has tunnel vision. And I think in this game, I feel like if she carries on in the way she has been living her life, it's so dark, it's internally so dark, it will be self-destructive. So in this game, it's really sort of about refinding herself and her light again. For me, it's hard. For me, it feels like I've had to mourn characters with her, and that mourning has driven her to do the things that she's done. So yeah, it has been a journey of being this young girl and then sort of diving into the dark depths of how, as a human, you can mourn and become consumed, and what that means and how that affects your psyche. And so it's been a difficult journey. I'm glad that there are years gaps in the game, because I feel like, once we're done, I'm exhausted because it's a lot. But I have to say, and I'm not just saying this, but this is the game this is my favorite game, the third, and it's the game that has stuck with me the most. after shooting particular scenes.
And it seems like, very high stakes, as Dan was saying, you're triggering an apocalypse here, so that's a lot going on.
No big deal, just the end of the world.
Yeah, I'm like, end of the world, triggered by Lara. Jill, tell us a bit from a story perspective. We know some hints of obviously where it's going to be set, incredibly high stakes. Tell us a bit about, the journey that Lara's going to go on, and we saw, some hints of some characters there. A new antagonist. So tell us, what can you tell us about the story?
In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we see Lara really fighting not to become the enemy that she hates. And in many cases, we might even see the enemy is herself. She's going to make a lot of mistakes, deal with a lot of complicity.
Yeah.
And I always think, depending on your perspective, a hero can also be a threat. And in this game, Lara has to decide, with all of the power that she has, as she's becoming the Tomb Raider that she's destined to be, which of those is she going to choose? Yep,
absolutely. So the story is evolving. The game and gameplay, as you guys saw, is evolving. Rich, you've been with Tomb Raider for many years here. Tell us about, going into this game, Daniel, the studio in Montreal that's been involved in previous games, but really taking the lead on this one. Where did you guys want to evolve the game and the gameplay now that you're into the third in this trilogy?
What was really important was to show growth, and I think, as Camilla was saying and as Jill was saying, in the narrative, we really wanted to make sure we were talking about Lara's arc, but we also wanted to make sure that there was an arc across the gameplay itself. So if you think about Tomb Raider 2013, our gameplay pillars are things like tombs, right? So at first, Lara was saying, I want to make my mark, and she was going into her first tomb. And then in Rise of the Tomb Raider, we said, well, we're going to put the tombs back in Tomb Raider. And so it was all about going into tombs, but they were very, very aspirational tombs. You were looking up, the Byzantine culture, looking to God. And then in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we said we're going the opposite direction. We're going down, we're going deep. It was a culture that worshipped fear, and so now the tombs were becoming terrifying. So we always try to make sure we're having those arcs, or if you look at the combat, Lara goes from being hunted by Trinity to being the hunter, and now finally to becoming one with the jungle. And so, Dan and I, years and years ago, Dan, 3.5 years ago, when we were on conference calls and chatting in conference rooms, sitting there saying, how are we going to make sure that Lara feels like the apex predator almost, where she is using the jungle to her advantage. She is sitting there and saying, I know I'm outgunned, I know I'm outnumbered, but I'm not outsmarted. And I am going to use things like putting mud on myself as camouflage, or striking like a jaguar and then disappearing into the canopy, or using fear against the enemy so that they'll take each other out. All of these things to show that Lara is very, very smart and resourceful, and that's her evolving across the combat. And then one of my favorites is, the idea of the hero's journey. And as they were saying, it's going from, learning that she was a survivor to becoming more and daring to go further, and now bringing that conflict internally to her defining moment.
Wow. Dan, I remember you and I talked when I was doing the making of the first Tomb Raider, Final Hours Tomb Raider. We talked a lot about the systems and how you were designing, thinking of gameplay. One thing I noticed in this footage, I'm sure you guys did too, is, much more stealth, right? It feels like, it's more sophisticated, right? It's not just, unlimited bullets and running around going crazy. Tell us about that as a game mechanic. I know this is early in the game. Is there a lot more stealth in this game? What should we expect in terms of balance of stealth versus action?
There's a lot more stealth in this game. We want to push a lot more the aspect that Lara, she's way more smarter, she's more experienced. Because I've been on this franchise for a long time too. I was at Crystal Dynamic at the time. I was talking with Rich at the time, been 8 years now. Even at the time, we talked about how we be expressing all the mechanics, especially combat, how she would be going from a hunted to a hunter and all these things. And one of the things that resonates very well, that fits perfectly with her, was the fact that she could use the environment. She could use the environment because she would seeing the environment as a puzzle and looking at it and saying, I'm not going to be just shooting them in the face, but how can you use the environment? And in Shadow,
maybe one with the jungle.
And then in Shadow, it became one with the jungle.
We've already got the messaging down. Nicely done, Geoff.
So she's becoming the jungle, because one of the things that was crazy and we loved about that is the fact that she's not a predator anymore. She's not preying. She's just the environment. She becomes the world. because of all the experience she went through for all the survival. So the jungle is perfect for that. So and the stealth is exactly something that represents who she is, even at the time that when we're doing Shadow.
Yeah, and I love the fact that going to the jungle was a really conscious decision, because we said, all right,
Peru, right?
Sorry?
Peru is where we are?
Correct. We start in Mexico, then we go to Peru.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason was that we wanted to make sure we started off with Lara being the most capable, the most calculating, also the most conflicted, as Dan said, but the height of her skills.
Yeah.
We don't want you to start the game all over again like all these adventures didn't happen. She has a bunch of skills. That's very early in the game, but she's using all the tactics as well as new ones that you've played in the previous games. And so the idea was, where are we going to take Lara that those skills would not even be, enough, that she would still have to learn and grow? We take you to the deadliest place on earth, the place where everything is trying to kill you. So even things like where we take you was a part of Lara's growth, because even at the height of her powers, the jungle still represents a survival situation for her.
The crazy aspect of that is that what you see is the beginning of the game. So she's, you see that she's very experienced, but we go even further as we go in the game. She reaches a climax even at the end of the game where, she's the most terrifying thing. She's the more scary thing. So that's very exciting.
So lots more sneaking, Camilla, right?
A lot more
Swimming?
sneaking. Yeah, a lot more sneaking in this game.
Tell us about the process of bringing the character to life. I think everyone knows that you do the performance capture, so we saw obviously very dramatic scenes.
Yeah.
We were talking before, like, you get to see it now sort of in a more finished form versus...
This is the first time that I've seen it too, which is crazy, yeah.
Because you're normally on kind of a performance volume.
So we're usually in the volume, that we've done with all 3 games, and then in-game stuff happens in a VO booth.
Okay.
Yes. That's when they're like, hey, drown. And you're like, okay, I'll just drown real quick. That's where that stuff happens. But a lot of those scenes, like the last one, or at the beginning scene with them in the bar, I think that was the first scene we shot, actually. It might have been the first scene in the bar scene. Yeah.
Both of those were
Both
really
of those
early.
were very early. So
You're shooting that with the other actors, right? So just like
so Earl, who plays Jonah, I shot with him. People probably know this about motion capture, but it's very different compared to doing a TV show where we're dealing with sets or a hospital or whatever it is, and there's no set around you, so you have to use a lot of your imagination. But sometimes that really works in your favor, because what you picture in your head can be much scarier or more emotional than what someone could even build for you. So it's always an adventure for me, because I get to live in my mind a little bit whenever I go and do another
you get
game.
surprised when it all comes
Yeah,
together.
and then I get to see what they've made, and it's always better than what I could even imagine. So it's incredible to actually just even see a little bit today.
The story that I love that I heard about you from that scene was that...
Which one?
The last scene with you and Jonah on the rooftop, where you were just saying, no, you've got to go further.
Yeah.
I was going to say, tell them, this is awesome. I love that, if you don't mind sharing.
What part of it, though?
Where you, what I heard at least was that you were saying, we have to do it again, It's got to be more emotional, to the one point where Earl finally started yelling at you.
It was the end of the day.
It was the end of the day. We hadn't had lunch, we were tired. No, I'm kidding. It was the end of the day, and I just remember that really they wanted Earl to get to the point where he lost his shit. And he was sort of being a kinder Jonah, in a way, than we wanted him to be. So that I was like, let's do it again. And I just laid more into him. And the more I pissed him off, I guess, the more heated he got. And then we ended up with that.
That was not take one. That was like take
That was
10.
not take one. Yeah, no, that scene probably took a couple of...
That was the second to last take, because we always do an extra one for safety, even though
They
on
do.
that one, because we're facing the monitors, we have our back to you.
Yeah.
We all looked at each other and went, when that one was
Yeah.
done. But then it was like,
I think we just collapsed after that scene. It was so exhausting. But no, I knew that I needed to get him to that point, and he was being too gentle with Lara, like he's been before, and Jonah has to confront her in that way for it to work, and for her journey and his journey to separately work. That moment needs to happen. So we ran it over and over, yeah.
The first time I saw the scene, for me, because I saw them, when I see the scene, they present to me, I have to, I review it and everything, but they have all these costumes and all the, they have all these balls on them because it's motion capture.
Oh,
That's how I see the scenes, And
so flattering.
They say, this is, because there was multiple takes, and they say, this is, the one that we think may be good, but there's another one that's very special. And they showed it to me, and I was like, wow. That is the scene. This is the one where Jonah was like screaming, and I was like, wow, this is insane.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I really felt something, that impactful, emotional at that moment when we were looking at the scene in the game, because you have to imagine, when you see all these things, you have to imagine how the characters would come up on screen, and it was very powerful. There's other scenes also that is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But I just love that dedication. I love that dedication because we
I was just trying to piss them off as much as I could.
But you were like, no, you've got to go further because we needed that with Lara's journey. We had to show that, Jonah and Lara have been through so much together. They're like brother and sister that, Lara is Jonah's little bird. The fact that she has put so much pressure on herself and that the world is putting so much burden on her that it could strain even that relationship, to me, is one of the powerful things about the story that we're telling.
Right. Well, this is the moment that I feel like, again, sets them off on the journey that they take separately and together. So it had to be intense like this. Also, she did just set off the end of the world, which is like a minor issue.
Vexing you for the entire game. Let's talk a bit about the antagonist of this game, Jill. You had a good quote. I was reading a story today where all the characters in this game, I think, you said the antagonist is such a multi-dimensional character that he could be a protagonist in a different game. And the idea is it's not just a villain or, a cartoonish villain. It's someone that actually has texture to their character, which, as Camilla was saying, I'm sure gives the entire game kind of more emotional weight to us. Tell us sort of her adversary in this game. Who's Geoff? Yes.
I don't think we saw him in this version of the gameplay, but he's Dr. Dominguez. He is the head of Trinity.
Okay.
And his motivations, which we'll get into more later, perhaps at E3.
Jill's being very careful right now.
I know.
She's like trying to get staring at it. I'm like, I'm trying.
It's hard. It's hard because I love this character, and it's a character that I think really came alive through the process of performance capture with Carlos Leal, who plays him.
Okay.
But he's someone whose motivations they often come across as just as compelling as Lara's, and he's someone that I think will make the player question her motives, and he even really gets in her head and makes her question herself. And I think that brings her whole struggle alive.
Yeah.
To have such an equal challenger to face against.
It's conflicting knowing both of their motives, like when you're kind of like, ugh, about both of them.
Yeah, and I do think she also pulls him. They set each other on edge.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about, if I remember, about Dominguez is that we wanted to have a bad guy that would be the hero of his own story, like you were saying, and it was more like a tragic story. If you would be flipping the coin saying, I'll be this person, and we wanted to make sure that the players would love him as much, saying, oh, I could believe why he's doing that. I would like to be that person, or I would be with that person. And this is something we worked very hard to make sure that people are like, wow, this guy, I could be part of his team. And that is the thing
and this is something that we continue to argue about even within the team. Like, there are people that are like, no, he's definitely right.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, you could potentially side with him, which is a very interesting thing for like a quote-unquote villain, where you feel like, I could be on your side as opposed to Lara's.
Exactly.
Which is really interesting.
She caused the apocalypse, and he says, I'm going to fix it.
Yeah, but imagine how short the game would be if she didn't. It'd be like,
she
doesn't take the dagger, credits.
Oh my God.
Like
so are there a lot of scenes with, Dominguez and Lara, is that a character we're going to sort of see that play out throughout the game? It's not just sort of like leading up to this, final confrontation.
I don't want to give away too much of the story, but I would also like to mention that a lot of the experience in the story are carried by the gameplay itself, and this is a game that's going to have a lot of open exploration and a lot of other characters to meet in the world.
Okay,
and it's not always based in the cinematics, and it's not always a purely linear experience. We really have a lot of moving parts working together to drive the story.
That's awesome. Well, you said like that's, I think the trend now is to have some big cinematic moments, those big intense scenes, where you said like kind of continue the narrative throughout. Let's talk a little bit more about sort of the gameplay and the systems. You know, we talked about the stealth. I imagine there are still those, you know, big action set pieces that we're going to see throughout the game. Can you maybe tell us a bit about sort of some of the other, you know, mechanics or new styles of gameplay? I know there's some new rope gameplay as well, right?
Yeah, it's like Jill, I cannot talk too much about all these new stuff, but I would say a couple of things. Yeah, we have this rappel because when we look, if you look at Lara, the way she is physically now, she's way more toned, she's way more muscle because
I worked out a lot. You know? Had a baby and then I just really killed it in the
Do all your own stunts.
Yeah, exactly.
All my own muscles.
So she's going to be doing things that she would normally not be able to do otherwise. And yes, we're pushing the aspect of pillar we're talking about that we call the traversal, which is the movement in the world, and we're pushing that way more than we did before. So part of that is exactly the rappel and the wall run in other ways. Also how he interacts with the tombs and stuff like that. So there's new mechanics. There's also new experience. The way you can experience the game will be different from a player perspective. But more specific than that, I can.
Well, we can, you know, one thing we can talk about, because what I love is
Rich is giving you approval here.
There you go.
Yeah, you got the grand seal of approval.
He's the one who says yes or no.
Yeah.
Can I share an anecdote about the traversal? One of our designers said this, and I loved it. He was like, yes, we've added things like rappelling. And so now, as she is descending into her mental state, she is literally descending in the gameplay.
Yeah. Well, it's great because I think we added a lot of verticality. If you look at, you know, the rappelling with the wall run and the jumps that happen from that, we have climbing puzzles that you need the grappling hook to use now in order to succeed. And then going with the swimming, you know, we have underwater swimming, which was one of the most requested features by fans. Yep. And in Rise of the Tomb Raider, we let you kind of paddle around the surface. Dan, you have to make the whale sound. I cue you, right? So he has the best. Yeah. Dan always says it's not like swimming out in the ocean. We got a bathing suit and you hear a whale going. It's swimming when we have to put our survival lens on it, where you are managing your oxygen supply, where you are going through cenotes, where you don't know if on the other side of this twisting cavern, if it's, you know, a secret or a hidden challenge tomb or a collectible or maybe just death, because you don't know. It's dark. It's never been explored before.
Exactly, because today we know that the most place that is not explored yet completely on the planet is all the underground caverns, certain things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to lay down a lot of these secrets, I would call them, and take the risk. Like, am I gonna drown? But maybe I will take the risk and find this, find this special tomb or special place. That was important for us.
Yes.
Wow. Well, it looks incredible. We can't wait to see more of it. It's coming out soon. That's the good news, September 14th, so you guys don't have to wait too long to check it out. What did you guys think of the game overall? All right. Good to hear. We'll see more, I'm sure, at E3, just 6 weeks away. I want to thank all you guys for joining us here at Tribeca Film Festival. Thanks to all you guys for joining us for the panel. Thanks for everyone watching the stream. And we will see you in September to play Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.